Hello, Vegas! Oh, it's good to be back in Vegas. Hello, Nevada. All right, first of all, I want you guys to give it up for your next outstanding members of Congress, Susie Lee and Stephen Horsford. Your next Lieutenant Governor, Kate Marshall. Your next Governor, Steve Sisolak. We've got your outstanding Senator, Catherine Cortez Masto here. And give it up for the woman who's going to be joining her in the United States Senate, Jacky Rosen. You guys go ahead and take a seat. I got a lot to say. Now, first of all, I have to say that I miss you too. I do. First of all, look, I'm not alone in saying I enjoyed coming to Las Vegas. Other Americans also enjoy coming to Vegas. You can get anything you want right here in Vegas. Some things you shouldn't want. A lot of things that are good for you. Outstanding food, great shows, you name it. And then we brought some shows here today. You know what? Who doesn't love salt and pepper? Come on. Who doesn't love J Balvin and reggaeton? I was backstage. Fortunately, there were no cameras going when I was jamming. So Las Vegas is known for its hospitality. It's known for its spirit of fun. It's known for its outstanding people. It's known for its sunny weather. But there's one other thing that I want Las Vegas and all of Nevada to be known for, and that is for voting. I want this to be the capital of voting. I'm here just to get one thing from you, and that is for you to vote. Look, this November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot. That's saying something. Politicians say every time, oh, this is the most important election. This one's really that important. The stakes are high. The consequences of anybody here not turning out and doing everything you can to get your friends, neighbors, family to turn out, the consequences of you staying home would be profoundly dangerous to this country, to our democracy. We've had challenging moments before. Democracy has never been easy. Our founders argued about everything. We waged a civil war for freedom. We overcame a Great Depression. We had to fight for women's rights and workers' rights and civil rights and immigrants' rights and LGBT rights. And there have been times where we went into eras of conservative retrenchment. And we had to fight that much harder for progressive change. And the good news is that the trajectory of America has been one of progress. But that progress didn't happen by itself. It didn't happen automatically. It was made by folks like you. It wasn't made by folks who sat back and let history just kind of happen. It was made by ordinary Americans who marched and mobilized and voted to make history happen. It was made by students heading south for Freedom Rides. It was made by union workers deciding we are going to collectively bargain to have a better future. It was made by people who took risks, and they didn't get their name up in lights, but they knew they were doing the right thing, if not for themselves, then at least for their kids. And every 2 steps forward that we took, sometimes we've taken a step back. You know, you win the right to create a union, and then suddenly folks come up with new ways to try to bust unions. You win a higher minimum wage, then Congress doesn't raise the minimum wage for a decade. You win the right to vote, people try to take it away. Every time we have gotten closer to our ideals, a country that recognizes that all people are created equal, that we're all endowed with certain unalienable rights by our Creator. Every time we have tried to make that manifest, make that real, the status quo is pushed back. The powerful, the privileged, they fight hard to keep what they got. And they like to try to divide us. And they try to make you cynical, because that helps them keep power and keep their privileges. And we're in one of those moments right now. We all recognize it. Look, we didn't get here overnight. The world's going through big changes, economic changes, demographic changes, technological changes. It's challenged who we are and what we stand for and how we adapt to these new circumstances. And the fact is that some of these challenges are big, and they're tough, and they're hard, and we haven't addressed all those challenges. And so what happens is people get scared, and when they get scared, you see backlash against progress. When I walked into office 10 years ago, we were in the middle of the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. That was the last time that the other party was in charge of things. I do think it's interesting. I just hope people kind of notice that every time there's a pattern where they run things into the ground and we have to come back and clean things up and then, but Nevada was hit as hard as any place. Everybody here remembers. Well, not everybody, because some of you guys are really young. Those of you who are older than 15 remember, sort of. But because of the work we did, working with people like Harry Reid, who I love, we got the economy growing again. We started the longest streak of job creation on record. We covered another 20 million people on health insurance. We brought housing back here in Nevada. We cut our deficits by more than half, partly by making sure the wealthiest Americans, folks like me, paid their fair share of taxes. So by the time I left office, wages were rising, uninsurance rate was falling, poverty was falling, and that's what I handed off to the next guy. So when you hear all this talk about economic miracles right now, remember who started it. Remember who started it. Come on. Now, that's important to remember. Now listen though, the fact is, even for all we did, we couldn't reverse 40-year trends in only 8 years. Because part of what happened is Republicans took over Congress. They then decided to block everything I tried to do. Everything. Even stuff they used to support. They didn't support it. Now, suddenly they support it again. So we pulled the economy out of crisis, but you still had people who were struggling. You still had people who once felt solidly middle class and now felt more insecure because of technology and loss of manufacturing jobs and globalization. All that stuff was still going on. And that was just here in the United States. Overseas, we took out bin Laden. And we wound down the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we got Iran to halt its nuclear program. But there were still a lot of threats out there, and that made people nervous. And so with all these challenges, a lot of folks started feeling, you know what, change doesn't happen fast enough. And people felt maybe nobody was looking out for them. And then there was all this money being pumped into campaigns by these big billionaire PACs who were trying to say, you know what, the Democrats, they don't really think like you or look like you or believe the same things you do. And people got cynical, and Republicans in power want you to feel cynical. They want you not to vote. Instead of addressing the challenges that exist, they exploit some of the history that we have in this country of racial and ethnic and religious divisions. And they try to get people angry, you know? And they appeal to tribe, and they appeal to fear, and they try to pit one group against another. And they tell us that order and security is going to be restored as long as we don't let those people take over, the people who don't look like us or sound like us or pray like we do. They start talking about real Americans as if some of us aren't real Americans. No, I mean, it's an old playbook. And you see that the closer we get to Election Day, the more you're seeing folks resort to that. Now, in a healthy democracy, that kind of stuff doesn't work. Because what happens is people of goodwill in both parties start calling out bigots and fear-mongers, and they work to compromise, and they work to get things done. The practical solutions caucus, you know, starts kicking in. But when there's a vacuum in our democracy, when we don't vote, when we take our rights for granted, when we turn the other way to politics because we think it's ugly and messy and we don't want to hear it, that's when the voices fill in the void, other voices. And demagogues start promising simple fixes to complicated problems. And they promise to fight for the little guy, and then they turn around and are helping corporations and billionaires and the most powerful do their bidding. And they'll pledge to take on corruption, and then they just plunder away. And they start undermining some of the institutions that are essential to our democracy. They make it harder for young people and minorities and the poor to vote. And that entrenches their power further. There are states where Republicans are actively purging voter rolls right now, where they have tried to say that students and college students operate under different rules than others and make it harder for them to vote. And look, I have to say that this kind of politics, it's not actually conservative. It's radical. It's a vision that says we're going to protect our power no matter what, even if it hurts the country. We're going to divide the country and make everybody angry, even though we know that's not actually going to help create jobs or put food on the table or pay the rent or make sure that health care is protected. It's a vision where the few people who can afford those high-priced lobbyists and unlimited campaign contributions, they set the agenda. And rather than be a check or a balance on this kind of corrupt politics, you've got Republicans in Congress who bend over backwards to shield it from scrutiny and accountability and consequence, just like Jackie was saying. The current senator, he doesn't seem to be willing to stand up to this. He just goes along, even when you get a sense that he knows it's not right. But it's okay. He just goes ahead and goes along. So that's the moment we're in. But here's the good news about it. Right now, we've got a chance to restore some sanity to our politics. Right now, we can tip the balance of power back to you, the American people. Because ultimately, there is only one real check on abuses of power. There's only one real check on bad policy, and that is you and your vote. You. And you know, the great thing in Nevada, you don't have to wait 2 weeks. You can go ahead and vote right now. In Nevada, early voting is already underway. You can vote at any early voting site in your community. If you don't know where that is, just go to votenvdems.com. Find out where you can vote. So, there's no reason to overcomplicate stuff. Sometimes I think Democrats do just like they're analyzing stuff. Just vote. And if you don't think it's important to vote, look at what the Republicans have done these past 2 years. Look at what they're saying they're going to do if you send them back to do more. Here's just one simple fact. This is a fact. This is not, unlike some, I actually try to state facts. I believe in facts, right? I believe in a fact-based reality and a fact-based politics. I don't believe in just making stuff up. I think you should actually say to people what's true. So here's what's true. They handed out $1.5 trillion in tax cuts aimed at billionaires and corporations. You know what? It was not done for you. $1.5 trillion. They didn't even pretend to pay for it. Deficits shot up. When I was president and I was trying to fund early childhood education or trying to fund infrastructure, they would say, no, we can't do that. Deficits are too high. It's an existential crisis. Then suddenly, when it comes to giving $1.5 trillion for folks who are already sitting pretty, don't need it, weren't even asking for it, suddenly deficits are no problem. Don't even try to pay for it. Don't pretend to pay for it. Except just last week, the leader of the Republicans in Congress, wait, don't boo, vote. Booing doesn't do anything. Booing doesn't help. Voting helps. Voting helps. Voting helps. Voting helps. Don't boo. Don't boo. Don't hashtag. All that stuff is nice to do. Vote. Anyway, just now, Mitch McConnell says, well, suddenly, now that he's passed the $1.5 trillion tax cut, he says, these deficits are a really big problem. And, no, now you guys need to pay attention to this. To bring them down, we're going to have to cut programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. All right, so I just want everybody to understand, if you don't think voting matters. You didn't vote, or at least folks you know didn't vote. They win. They give $1.5 trillion to people who don't need it. Not working people, not families, to folks who are sitting pretty. They then come back and say, now that we've spent $1.5 trillion, we need to figure out how to make up for that by cutting programs that working families rely on. It's a pretty straightforward equation. And we should not be confused about this. I don't know how much simpler it could be. If you believe that folks like me need a tax cut and folks like your grandma needs a cut in her Social Security, then you're right. You should just sit home and not vote. If, on the other hand, you think that's a bad idea, and you say to yourself, actually, Obama's doing pretty good. Seems like, all these corporations out there are doing pretty good, but grandma really needs to make sure she can keep paying rent, then you have to vote. Look, this is, I can't make this any simpler. These same Republicans voted to take health care away. Now, this is like a reflex with these guys. They just can't help themselves. Every year, 60-something times they've tried to take it away. Yeah, that's true. But look, now that it's election season, they are out there saying, well, actually, we're going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, even though we're going to cut health care. Now, let me say something. As the person who actually passed the law that prevents people with pre-existing conditions from being discriminated against, I can tell you that they have no way of protecting pre-existing conditions with anything they've proposed. They're just saying it. They're just making it up. 8 years ago, Harry Reid and I and the Democrats, we worked to make it illegal for the first time for insurers to discriminate against you just because you had a pre-existing condition like asthma or cancer. By the way, if you're a woman, your insurance rates were higher just because you were a woman. We said you can't do that. That was called the Affordable Care Act. And Republicans have tried to undermine it and sabotage it and repeal it dozens of times. When all the chips were on the table, your health care was at stake. Jacky Rosen's opponent was in on those votes. If Republicans keep Congress this fall, you better believe they are coming after health care again. And millions of people across the country who count on this are not going to have it. Even Republicans, they just don't know it. I tell you, it's true. There are states where, like, hundreds of thousands of people are really benefiting from Obamacare. They just don't call it Obamacare, which is fine. I didn't make up the name. I don't care what it's called, but I do care about those folks having health care. So I know you can bet on anything here in Vegas, but you don't want to bet that the Republicans are actually going to protect your health care. You don't want to bet that they actually can preserve the law that says you can't discriminate against people because of pre-existing conditions. That's a bad beat. That's a bad bet. That's not going to work. That's letting foxes into the hen house. There's a better bet, though, Nevada. Jacky Rosen's a good bet. Jacky Rosen believes that health care is not a privilege for the few, but a right for everybody. You send Jacky to the U.S. Senate, she's not going to let Republicans gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions. You can count on that. She's not going to let Republicans gut your Medicare to pay for their tax cuts. She's going to protect your care, period. All these Democrats are going to fight for any attempt to roll back coverage for you and your family, which is why you have to vote. And the reason you can count on, these folks have a track record. They, like other Democrats, believe that a growing economy should benefit everybody, not just a few at the top. Instead of continuing to have Republicans attack unions, we need somebody who's going to stand up for workers' rights to organize for higher wages and stronger benefits. Rather than side with the biggest banks and the for-profit colleges, we need people to invest in our public schools and help more Nevada students be able to attend UNLV and earn the higher education that they deserve without going broke. And you know what? We've got to convince some people who might not agree with Democrats on every issue to at least vote with these candidates on the issues that they should care about. You know, look, people of both parties and no party should be concerned with this current situation. Folks should want to see a restoration of honesty and decency and lawfulness to our government. They should want to see some checks on what's happening. It is not a Democratic or a Republican idea that we are not supposed to pressure the Attorney General or the FBI to use the criminal justice system to try to punish political opponents. That's not how America works. That's how some tin pot dictatorship works. That's not supposed to be America. It shouldn't be Democratic or Republican to say we don't threaten freedom of the press just because they publish stories we don't like. It shouldn't be Democratic or Republican to say we don't target certain groups based on what they look like or how they pray. I mean, there are fiscal conservatives who I'm assuming have to believe there's nothing fiscally responsible about trillion-dollar deficits. I'm assuming there's some compassionate Republicans out there who think there's nothing American about ripping immigrant children from their mothers. Look, don't boo. Vote. If you help us take back Congress, Nevada, then we can make the kind of progress that's needed. If you don't, we won't. That's just the bottom line. And by the way, this is not just about one person in the White House. This is about Congress and governor's races and state legislative races. Because power in America isn't just in one person. I mean, if all it took was being president, shit, I would have solved everything. But it turns out, you know, you have Congress, you have governors, you have state, so we've got to vote everywhere for up and down the ballot. And here's the thing, when you vote, good things happen. When you vote, you have the power to make sure we strengthen laws to protect women in the workplace from harassment and discrimination. You have the power to make sure they're paid equally. When you vote, you have the power to make it easier for a student to afford college, harder for a disturbed person to shoot up a classroom. When you vote, you have the power to make sure a family keeps its health insurance. You could save somebody's life. That power rests in your hands. Yes, you can. And I want to talk about young people in particular here for a moment. Because you know, I've got two young people named Malia and Sasha who are, they're the loves of my life. But you know, I have to tell them sometimes that your generation is the one that is going to determine the direction of America for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And right now, too many young people don't vote. You know, in the last midterm, about 1 out of every 4 young people voted who were eligible. That means 3 out of 4 who were eligible to vote didn't bother to turn out. Now that makes no sense. Michelle and I, we talk about it. We joke, look, for the young people out here, you wouldn't let your grandmother decide what you should wear. You would not allow your parents to decide what's on your playlist. So if you are very protective about those choices, why wouldn't you be protective about your power to choose whether or not we do something about climate change, which will have an impact on you? Why wouldn't you choose to elect representatives who reflect your values and are going to do something about criminal justice reform, if that's something you care about? You can't just give your power away. You've got to exercise it. So the good news is I'm kind of hopeful, because I'm starting to see out of this political darkness right now a great awakening of citizenship around the country. I can't tell you how encouraged I've been watching so many people getting involved for the first time. They're out there with clipboards, and they're organizing, they're marching, and they're knocking on doors, and they're making phone calls. And some of them are starting to run for office. People who've never been interested in politics before, they said, you know what, this time I've got to get involved. And so we've got a movement of citizens out there, including record numbers of women, which women like Jackie and Susie and Kate and Nevada, you could be the first state ever to elect a state legislature where the majority are women. Which I'm pretty sure things will work better if you give women a chance to run things for a while. But you have to vote. You've got an important ballot initiative to vote for, too, here in Nevada. Automatic voter registration is on the ballot. You vote yes on 5, and every eligible voter who applies for a Nevada driver's license or ID automatically gets registered to vote. When more people vote, good things happen. So, I know that people have been feeling anxious these days. People get frustrated, they get angry. Folks come up to me, they say, oh, Barack, what are we going to do? Oh, you know, what about Michelle? You know, listen, Michelle, she's not running for president, but she is out there telling you to vote. Because the antidote to government by the powerful few is government by the organized, energized many. The antidote to everything you don't like is you voting. And that's what this moment's about. One election, listen, one election won't fix everything, but it'll be a start. One election isn't going to eliminate, poverty in America, but it'll give more policies that help poor people a chance. One policy will not solve all issues of racial discrimination, but if you have elected officials who care about that, then things get better. One election is not going to solve climate change, but if you have candidates and governors who believe in solar power and wind power and the job creation that comes from that, and are willing to invest in clean energy, things get better. And I always used to I always used to have to explain this to my staff because they're all like, oh man, we're not getting everything. I say, yeah, but it's going to be better. Better is really good. Better is how we make progress. And you have to start it right here in this election. And then every day thereafter, just keeping things getting a little better. The threat to our democracy does not come from one person in the White House or Republicans in Congress or big money lobbyists. The biggest threat to our democracy is indifference. The biggest threat to our democracy is cynicism that says we're just going to stay home because my voice doesn't matter. But listen, I won states because 10 people extra in every precinct voted. I won that state because of that. The last election, it was probably the same number of people that could fit into a football stadium swayed the entire election. Don't tell me your vote doesn't matter. If you don't like what's going on right now, and you shouldn't, don't complain. Don't get anxious. Don't throw up your hands. Don't boo. Vote. And when you vote, not just for these candidates, but up and down the line for mayors and sheriffs and district attorneys, you have the power to make sure our voting rights are protected. And our criminal justice system treats everybody equally under the law. When you vote, you can protect dreamers and keep families together. And we can finally pass sensible immigration reform that secures our border and strengthens all of us. When you vote, you've got the power to make sure we strengthen laws that protect women and give my daughters and your daughters the same chances as everybody's sons. When you vote, you have the difference to make, not just in this country, but around the world. Your voice. So I'm hoping that you make the right call here. I'm hoping that you tell your friends and your neighbors, you knock on doors, you talk to friends, you argue with some of those family members, you convince new voters, tell them to get out to vote early for this entire incredible Nevada team. And when that happens, something powerful will happen when you start voting, when you're activated. Hope happens. And with each new step we take in, with each new step, we move in the direction of fairness and justice and equality and opportunity, and hope spreads. So let's get to work. Let's go vote. Let's make sure that Jacky is your next senator. Let's make sure that you have a governor who cares about you. Let's make sure that you have a Congress that represents your values. Let's get out there, Nevada. I'm putting my money on you. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.